their parent-child visits, and then as they come week after week after week, we get to help advocate while they're working on the goal of reunifying, which also includes connecting them to the community, helping them see what and connect to what is out here to support them. 80% of the families in Greene County foster care system are there because of poverty-related issues, and so working alongside these parents, working alongside these kids to just have the best fighting chance they can, to know that people believe in them, that people love them, and that they're seen, they're visible, because I think sometimes they don't feel that way in our community. So this is now a program that is actually expanding across our city and across our state, and we share that out of humbleness to just say, like, we believe that every family and every child in the system deserves advocates and support, however they can get that.
Absolutely. So we get asked a question a lot, and I want to address it really quickly, and then we're going to dive into our first panelist. A lot of times the Connecting Grounds is well known for our work that we do with outreach and with the unsheltered community. And so sometimes Family Connection seems like this disjointed piece, but it's not at all. Mm-hmm. Like you said, 80% of our families in care here in Greene County are poverty related, but we learned recently that a quarter of last year's open cases actually were because most likely due to either unsheltered or shelter instability. And so that is one of the biggest factors right now that's often taking place in families when we are dealing with, not having a stable shelter to be in, or, electricity and some of those kind of issues. So do you want to speak about that for just a second?
Yeah, we've seen, especially since COVID pandemic, last year some of the reports were as many as 25% of these families went into care because they had unstable housing. What's heartbreaking about that is it's typically families that are just at some stressful breaking points and they don't have anything else. And what we're seeing in our city is that there is nothing else. There are some incredible resources out there to support families, but they have very limited spots. And a lot of those shelter beds, a lot of those funding are at capacity, or they're full time and time and time again. We do have an incredible domestic violence shelter here, but that is full so often. And a lot of the times, if you leave that space, because there's a lot of mental health and there's a lot of fear in breaking those barriers, you may not be allowed to go back. And statistically, they say if you're a domestic violence victim, you're going to go back several times before you really break that cycle. And so many of these families are caught in a place of just, there's nothing else. And so much of our advocacy comes from that heart of, we have families who love each other, families kiddos who love their parents, but this is the only thing that's left to try to catch them. And that's heartbreaking to me.
Do you want to introduce our first panelist?
I would love to. I just want to kind of set the stage to say that everyone we've invited tonight, we've simply invited them to come and share parts of their story. We've told them to just be authentic. This is not guided. This is not us trying to tell them what to say, what they're not allowed to say. And it's a very wide berth of stories and experiences. And so I promise it's probably going to be really emotional. I'm already getting emotional. And so I just want to set the stage.
Strategically placed Kleenexes throughout the room.
Yes. And for everyone who's participating, I would just want you to know that I'm so proud of you, and you are incredibly brave to be here. So thank you for coming and sharing your lived experience, your heartbreaks, your stories with us. So I want to start with Eden to come up here. Eden is actually someone I've not known for incredibly long, but someone I have, good call, very much fallen in love with. Eden has an incredible story as someone who has been in foster care, who now also volunteers for Family Connection with me and is also a CASA. And so just share with us a little bit about kind of all of those experiences, whatever's on your heart to share tonight.
Thank you for having me, Holly and Christy. I'm going to tell you, first of all, I'm a recovering people pleaser. So when Holly texted me and asked, would you mind to do this? It was, yes, I would love to do it. But then also it kind of hit me about 9 o'clock last night that it's today. So yesterday being Mother's Day was a little hard for me. I am a mother, and part of the reason that I was in foster care was due to my own mother's poor decisions. things that were outside of our control, and just environmental influences that really changed the trajectory of my life and my brother's life. So I'll just kind of dive into it and give you a little insight into my story. I went into foster care when I was about 3 years old. My brother and I had already experienced severe trauma, abuse, neglect, anything imaginable at that small age, and going into foster care looked like lots of unknowns. There was unlimited possibilities for coming in contact with unfamiliar people, people that were good for us, people that were not always the best for us, did not have our best interest in mind. We moved around foster care many times. We moved into several different homes. At one point, we were adopted, and unfortunately, that situation did not work out. We continued to experience abuse. We continued to have many situations that were unhealthy, unsafe for both of us. We ended up getting separated. My brother went back into the foster care system in Arkansas and went into a treatment facility, and I didn't see him for almost 11 years. He experienced his own series of unfortunate events. And then I also went back into the foster care system after a few years. Aged out at 18, I did end up going to college, where I ended up withdrawing from classes because I had my daughter. And something that Holly mentioned earlier is how some of the families that we come encounter with, even now, just looking for community resources. I was a single parent of a tiny baby, and trying to work and go to school was not really ideal. There were a lot of really precarious situations that I put myself in because I was afraid to ask for help. I was afraid that I would end up in the same situation that my mother was in whenever she had us. I refused to ask for help. I refused to just look for support because I didn't know what that would look like, and I didn't know how it would impact me or my daughter. Throughout foster care, there were many wonderful people that came in and out of my life, whether it was a teacher or a counselor, or I did have some wonderful foster parents, but there were moments of doubt, moments of insecurity and not knowing what it would look like as an adult. And so, so as I became an adult, I started looking for ways to not just give back to the community, but maybe prevent some of the things that kids experienced in foster care, myself and my brother included. And one of the ways that I found to connect with foster kids was to become a CASA. And as a court-appointed special advocate, I get to sit down with foster kids. I have an active foster care case where my kids and I sit and we talk about their case, things that are going on in their lives that are going great, but then also listening to them and giving them an opportunity to have that voice that they feel at the time that they've lost, or maybe no one is listening, and to give them the opportunity to be seen. And I think that that was really what I struggled with the most when I was a kid, because of all of the experiences that I was living through, not knowing who I could trust, not knowing who I could talk to, not knowing who was going to listen even if I did talk to them. And so being that safe adult and safe advocate for my CASA kids is so important. And then finding this beautiful, this beautiful program of Family Connections, knowing that had my mother in her young age of, becoming a mother to four babies she was under 20, had she potentially had these same services or these opportunities, that maybe our relationship would have been stronger. We will never know. We may have had opportunities that we didn't then, but I know that this program is so important to me, to see that families continue that relationship and have opportunities to share in moments and to have real life experience with connecting and loving one another, and in a healthy environment, knowing that there are safe people there that are guiding them and showing them and just loving them through the ups and downs and through the obstacles that they might experience as they navigate the foster care system, knowing that they have trust and compassionate people around them, and to relate that back to it's joy. It is pure joy to see those relationships grow and thrive, and even when the outcomes aren't what we hoped they would be, to just give them a space to experience them in the first place.
So Eden, tell me, what is one thing that you wish people understood about you when you were aging out of care, or like knew about kids who are in care and maybe at the cusp, like at the end of that, where they're aging out of care? What is one thing you wish people understood?
One of the struggles that I had aging out of the system was, all of my life, people were telling me what to do. Structures and guidelines and can do and can't do, and moving out on my own into my own place. I didn't have people telling me what to do anymore. And that also looked like making very poor decisions because I was just navigating however I could, whatever could get me to the next day. And sometimes those decisions were simply to just keep myself inside. My mental health really struggled. I didn't have a counselor anymore. I didn't have someone that I could run to and talk to, but I also didn't have parents. I didn't have anybody that would just tell me, yes, that's a good decision, or maybe that's not the greatest one. And so, finding solid resources was extremely difficult to navigate. And even now that I'm 20 years outside of the system, I'm still looking back thinking, man, I wish I would have known that, or I would be so much further ahead if I had only known that, or if someone would have guided me through that.
So my question for you would be, statistically, we know that kids who age out of care are more likely to end up on the streets without shelter. They're also more statistically likely to have kids in care later. And so I think, listening to your story, you've defied a couple of odds in those spaces. Speaking to people who maybe identify with your journey, maybe they are getting close to aging out, or they've aged out themselves, so they're in a space of struggle. What is just a word of encouragement or a word of advice that you would give to them that you wish maybe in that moment where you were first struggling, someone could really have spoken into you?
Yeah, I've asked myself that many times. What could I have done, or what's one thing that would have really made the difference? And honestly, it's to have a safe person to talk to. Even if that safe person only listens, or if they only provide an ear when you're struggling, to know that someone is listening, and maybe they can help find resources with you, not necessarily for you, but to connect to people that will advocate for you, because there are going to be days when you struggle. You know, even the strongest person has a tough day. And so having people that are willing to walk that journey, walking out the door into the unknown, and, you know, holding your hand or just picking up the phone.
So I'm gonna transition that moment out here and out into the Facebook world for a minute, because I want to make sure you catch that, because what Eden just said statistically lines up with what we know about trauma. And what we know about trauma is that the #1 biggest way to break cycles of statistics is to have positive people in your life, is to have people that are there and who are willing to listen and who are willing to be a sounding board and are willing to encourage you on hard days. So that's a call to action for us as a community, because we all have people around us in a city of our size with our poverty rate. We all have people in our lives who are single moms or stressed out parents who are struggling to make ends meet, who just need to know that somebody is there and somebody cares, and they're willing to help run errands on a hard day. They're willing to bring chocolate and coffee and just remind you that it's going to be okay. And so I say that to all of us, because even if you're not in a formal role in the foster care system in some way, shape, or form, I think all of us in this community can play an enormous role by just being a positive support system, whether that's for kids, that's for parents, that's for foster parents, that's for caseworkers, that's for anybody.
And I just want to add, as we wrap up, I think one of my favorite things, and someone else is in the audience who's one of my best friends who also aged out of care, people like you, Bobby, people like you, Eden, who as adults give back in this capacity is one of the most beautiful things in the world, because I think there is such a depth to your empathy and your compassion that you're giving to these kids through CASA, through Family Connection, through Kids Connection, just loving on them in those spaces because you knew what you needed. And so thank you for putting yourself in those positions, those emotions every single day. The difference that you're making is incredible. So thank you for sharing with us. Our next speaker I'd like to invite up, Shalia, is actually a teenager who's in foster care and is incredibly brave coming up here and sharing her story with us today. So Shalia, tell me just a little bit about you. What do you like to do? What do you like in school?
I like to go shopping. In school, I like to mess with people because I'm Hollywood, so they like me. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what grade in school are you right now?
I'm in 9th grade.
9th grade. How old were you when you went into the foster care system?
12.
12. And so you've been in the foster care system for a little bit now.
Yep.
Yeah. So tell me, what is something that's been really hard about being in foster care?
Not being close with family anymore.
Yeah. I know you have some siblings. Would you like to share a little bit about being a sibling in the foster care system and that experience?
Well, we all got separated except my sister. I'm still with my sister, but I'm not with my 2 brothers or my other sister. It's sad because I can't see them anymore. And my brother is moving to Florida, so yeah.
Yeah, that's really hard. How many times have you moved around since you've been in foster care?
I've been in 3 homes, but I've been in Great Circle a lot, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Has that involved changing schools and counselors, things like that?
I only changed school 2 times.
Yeah. And still changed a couple times though. That's hard.
Yeah,
Hard to start over again.
not really, but
Because she's fabulous, not really.
What is something that you wish people in the community knew about kids who are in the foster care system?
That all kids aren't rich because they think I'm rich. Yeah, it's kind of sad.
Yeah.
Oh, and they make fun of me for being in foster care, but it's okay.
It's not okay. This might be a hard question, but if there was anything that you could change about the foster care system, what would it be?
To be out of foster care, to be with my siblings and my mom again, because I missed them a lot.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
No. Nope.
Thank you, Shalia, for coming. I really appreciate your courage. I think she deserves a round of applause.
So I'm going to pick on Shalia for a minute while she's walking off. Because Shalia is another one who uses her experience. And Shalia and Lynn, my youngest, help to lead our Kids Connection program. And so they plan activities and they hang out with kids. Many of whom here at TCG have had similar experiences to Shalia. So I really appreciate that she can relate to them even at those young ages and just love on them and encourage them. So thank you for all you do here because you're pretty amazing. And I think they're now taking the kids to go next door and play.
All right, Alexis, do you need a minute? Okay. No, you're good. Taylor, I would like to invite Taylor up here. Taylor is also a really good friend of mine, and and Taylor is a fierce advocate for families in the foster care system, and she's done that in a lot of ways, including working at Children's Division as an investigator and a caseworker, and now as a Family Connection volunteer. So we felt like her perspective was incredibly valuable for a lot of reasons, because I think people who work at Children's Division sometimes are also part of, they get really bad stigmas and have a really hard job. But I also think it's important to hear the heart of someone who has wept over probably dozens of families and kids, and who continues to work fiercely in this world, even though you don't work in that career field anymore. So share a little bit of your heart with us, and it's okay.
Okay, I'll get it together. So, okay. So, oh, sorry. Okay, so I started at Children's Division when I graduated in 2018, and it was a part of an initiative, like they pay for your last year of college, or like your last semester of college, and you sign a contract, you work there for a couple of years. So I graduated with my BSW, but Children's Division has people with criminal justice majors, sociology majors, even sometimes there's some education majors. So we have policies and procedures that we follow, but everybody kind of has, you know, they have their own life experiences and just like way of handling things and interviewing, and we go through like a 4-week training course on like policies and steps, and so the system is a lot of check boxes. So I started out as an investigator, but during the pandemic, I transferred over to alternative care case management. And for a time, I worked in the Family Justice Center. So I was kind of doing a strange dual role and worked with a lot of domestic violence. And so a lot of the cases on my caseload were domestic violence. Let's see. I don't know. I don't know. You guys have questions? Or?
So I do. I have a question. I have several, but I have one thing that I think is really important to frame with this. Caseworkers get a really bad rap in a lot of respects when it comes to the foster care system. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge a couple of things. One of which is most people who have spent time as a caseworker walk away with some form of PTSD. And the things that I know you have wrestled with and seen, I just want to acknowledge that and hold space for that, because I think oftentimes we often focus on the trauma and the PTSD of our kids and our parents, and those are all huge. But I also want to recognize that there's a trauma element in the system itself for people who constantly, day after day, are seeing situations in which if only there were more resources, or if only people could have more time, or if only, I just want to acknowledge in this context and hold space for that. And thank you on behalf of all of those who do a really hard job in our community, because I know it's not easy. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about what that's been like to try to heal from some of that a little bit in your time away from Children's Division.
Yeah. So, like, during that time, I had a lot of, like, I was diagnosed with anxiety, and sorry, it sounds very difficult, but so after I left last year, I took some time and then started volunteering at the Family Connection Center because it was just really important to me, because I cannot talk and cry, I'm sorry. So during like my time as a foster care case manager, that was really important to me, but I could not find the time to give the families that I was working with what they deserve. And it was it was high caseload, which like I had half the caseload, even a quarter of the caseload of what everybody else had, because I worked with the Family Justice Center. So I was like, when people would come in, I was doing consults too for people that weren't involved in the system, but they were involved in domestic violence. They had questions about custody and Children's Division involvement if they had an open case. So, you know, even with just a quarter of the caseload, I had a whole family support team to answer to. I had court reports to write. I had to meet, you know, once a month FSTs for every single family. I had to make sure that every single family had the paperwork they were supposed to have, the resources they were supposed to have, the visits for children, which was super important to me that they were having visits with their children. But it was also hard because we didn't have any resources in the community. Like parent aides were full. They were full. And so when parent aides couldn't do it, we did it. And if we couldn't find the time or we couldn't find a parent aide, the judge got upset with us. And fair, because that's important that parents have visits with their children. You know, we don't have transport to visits. A lot of times, you know, foster families are working. You know, the rest of our team doesn't transport, so I was transporting a lot of my visits, and that was actually my favorite time because I got to like spend more time with my foster kids and those drives than like my monthly visits.
So let's talk about caseloads for just a minute, because I think that's a really important that not everyone realizes. It's being weird. Anyway, something that not everybody realizes is just because Greene County's foster caseload as a whole has gotten so high, our individual caseworkers' caseloads has gotten beyond what is really manageable for them to do. I would say most of them would agree to do their jobs well and to do it in a way that's healthy for them and healthy for the families that they're supposed to be serving. So what would you say when you left a year ago, what the average caseload was?
Oh my gosh, I have no idea. For kids, okay, this is gonna, there's what it actually is and what I feel like it was, what it feels like. I'd say maybe because I think we were supposed to have, like, I think what's manageable is supposed to be 10 kids. Like that's kids, that's siblings, like for foster care caseworkers. And then I think we were going on like 20 to 30, depending on the sibling group. And you know, you have a sibling group and then that raises, you know, the numbers much higher for you, and then the next person's on for the next. But investigators, I mean, investigators have so many cases, they're so understaffed. And then like, it's like we're all fighting for allotment of staff from the state on like how many can AC have, or alternative care, how many can investigations have. And so investigations, you know, it got to a point where they had to beg for, can we have one day in the office to get caught up? We'll take cases every single day. We'll take, you know, at least minimum 3 cases a day, every day, if we can just have one day in the office, because you get penalized for that because you have 45 days to close a case, and then so you don't have time to sit down and close those cases, even if you go out and there is no child abuse or neglect, or it's here's some resources, please fix this, and they do, and then you're done, and there's just no time to sit down and like type that and get it done. And that's a disservice to those families who call and say, hey, it's been 45 days, my case isn't closed, and it's just like, it's closed technically in our hearts. But
I spent some time looking back over a lot of the emails and the text messages I send, because in the job I do, my role, I get to work a lot with caseworkers. Families are referred to us from Children's Division, and so we become a part of that family support team, and so I work very closely with caseworkers. The top things that like were said the most commonly from our caseworkers were, I'm sorry I couldn't get a hold of you, I'm sorry that it's taken me so long to get back to you, I'm so sorry I dropped the ball on that. That's the number one by far. Some of the other things that were up there were literally words like, I'm exhausted, I am burned out, I'm weary, I am so tired. And a lot of those came in these personal conversations where they're telling me about this family and, you know, what's going on, and I'm so sorry I dropped the ball, and I'm sorry about this, and I'm like, hey, how are you? And they're like, I'm this. Several of them had talked about how they hadn't had a vacation in a long time, or how they needed a vacation from their vacation because they didn't have any chance to just unwind, and they were trying to capitalize on what little time they had off. And I've lost track of the number of times I've gotten phone calls from caseworkers, or I've talked to them and they've cried on the phone over cases and said this family didn't deserve this, this parent didn't deserve this. I feel so bad for them. I feel so bad for this child. And those are the things I wish the community could hear, because I think there is so much demand on our caseworkers, and there is so much pressure, and the caseloads are growing. And at the end of the day, I think the most consistent thing I can say across the board for our caseworkers is that there is not enough of them, and there are too many families, and that is a disservice to our families in our city. It's a disservice to our kids that are in foster care, and it's a disservice to our caseworkers, because it's such a sacrificial position and such an important position, and you don't get enough credit, you don't get enough pay, you don't get enough support. And I think that's really important that the community knows.
And like, our like investigations, our priority is to make sure that the children are safe. And I know that that's on a spectrum. Like, I know that as the parent, that they realize, and we realize, that the safest place is with them. As a social worker, we know that the best place for a child to be is with their parents. But, you know, we have to adhere to policies and state procedure, and we can't take that risk of, if there's too many risk factors and not enough protective factors to negate that risk, and we can't make a safety plan to lower those risks by keeping the kiddo in the home, having a safety plan, then, you know, our butt is on the line, because if that kid dies tomorrow, that news is not going to be great. KY3 it's not gonna be good. And not even that, but just like, you know, there are some people that have had kids die on their caseload, and that is our worst fear.
I love you. I'm grateful for you. I love your heart. And I am so proud of you for the way that you have been willing to come beside families in a wide range of spaces in our community. I think you and so many people who have walked in your shoes are some of the greatest unsung heroes of this community. And on behalf of us tonight, and you representing a career field that can't always speak for themselves when they're still actively engaged, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for what you've done to serve this community and to try to do your best to love on a lot of families that needed you in those moments.
Thank you, guys.
Alexis, are you ready? You can bring it. I feel like this is redundant, but Alexis is another dear friend of mine. I'm just friends with everybody. Alexis is a mama that I've known for a very long time now, pretty much since Family Connections started. This is baby King. He is precious. He's like, wait a second. Alexis is a mama who has experienced a lot of the injustice of the system and is one of the bravest, strongest people I know. And so I would like to share, just hear a little bit of your story, what you're willing to share. Her story is really heartbreaking, and it's really painful to talk about, but she told me that there was no reason she could turn this down, that being able to tell her story and advocate for families like hers was really important. So I'm so proud of you. It's okay.
I was in domestic violence. I was told to stay away from somebody, and I just couldn't. And, I had got hurt again. Basically woke up in the hospital to them saying they took my daughter. So I was, she was now in the system, and I had to do what they wanted me to do. And I did. And I was doing really good. I never been on my own. I've been, sorry. Most of my life has been controlled, from home age to leaving home to finding a man to control me, basically. Anyway, so he ended up going to he got in trouble. I was doing everything I was supposed to do. I started working. I was doing my counseling. I had an apartment that I got help with getting it through Harmony House. Well, when I was doing good, I just ended up talking to somebody I talked to when I was younger and getting myself in that same situation, but I was afraid to ask for help or call the police on this person because I was already in water for sending somebody to jail for something I continued to go back to and was let known was my problem, you know. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
You're fine.
Anyways, I ended up losing that house, and I ended up getting my eye split open, and that's how they found out. And I honestly tried to lie and stay away from that person, but when they found out, they just totally shunned me. My counselors and I know life stories like everywhere. It's just I can't help it. But they basically shunned me. The counselors that they gave to me from my caseworkers, they just stopped. They wouldn't take me anymore, and I would call and beg them. And anyway, so then their problem was I lost that home. So then the problem was that I didn't have a home to take her to, but I was doing everything else right. Or they would just focus a lot on my mental health and try to use that against me a lot. I don't know what else to say right now.
I think something that in walking so closely with you, and I see this so commonly in families in the system, is sometimes so much of the pressure against a timeline. There's this pressure to say you have to do this before the year's out because this permanency is set for a year, and statistically, you know, there's a lot of science behind the reasons why, but that can be the most intimidating thing in the world when you are a survivor of something that is incredibly violent and you've never stood on your own 2 feet. And I think we all watched you just kind of fly through some of this stuff and knock these things out, but you weren't taking the time, nor were you coached or given space. And I think talking like Taylor's perspective, like caseworkers who don't have the time to sit down and say, hey, you need to heal before you can really work on these things. You need to focus on you. It can be really exhausting to get the level of counseling, trauma counseling, and mental health support, and to do that in a way that is healing while you're up against a timeline. If you want to talk a little bit, because your timeline ran out with your kiddo.
To them, I'm not gonna lie, to them, it looked like I was doing so well, and I was, but once that person became violent with me, I just didn't know who to tell. Sorry. I just wasn't strong enough to call the police or tell anybody because I was already there for that. And once I was ready to tell, they just didn't want to listen to me anymore. But I ended up, my timeline did run out, and I ended up losing her. And she just was straight over adopted. They switched my caseworkers multiple times. My lawyer they provided, they switched on me multiple times, and I was just really just lost. I didn't have family I could just go stay with because I had burnt bridges by going back to my abuser. And they were hurt too over losing their grandchild. So
I think that's a really important thing that you're talking about. There's a lot of turnover in the system. Most of the families I work with will experience multiple caseworkers. And these are people, and knowing many of these caseworkers, these are caseworkers who are investing and getting to know, and our families are trusting them, and then literally sometimes through an email, they've been switched, and it's not it's not their choice. It's a matter of shuffling, the balancing the caseloads. It's a matter of with counselors, so many times there's these limits on how many they can have on a case. And so I think that's something that's also really heartbreaking across the border, because I've sat on both sides of that, where I've sat with moms and dads who have cried because they got really close to a caseworker or a counselor or a lawyer, and then like that, they lost that person, and having to deal with the grief of that and trusting someone new. And I've also sat with caseworkers and lawyers who've been like, that was not my choice, and I hope that damage doesn't like ruin their chances. Oh, King. Go to grandma. Something that I think is a huge stigma that I would like to point out has to do with Sweet Baby King, because you got pregnant while you were in the system, and I know you were terrified about that. And there's a lot of beliefs that when families are in the foster care system and they've lost their children, that they will automatically lose other children. I have dealt with a lot of hidden pregnancies with our families, and cried with them as they've revealed that they're expecting again, and that's not a good thing for them because they're so afraid of losing their other kids or losing the child they're carrying. And even though you didn't get to take home your daughter, you got to bring that baby home, and you're doing an amazing job raising him. I want to give you a little space just to talk a little bit about that, because I think every time I talk to you, I'm so proud of you, because there's this very coexistence place of you of grief, but also you're a damn good mom, and you're working really hard for your little boy. And so talk a little bit about that.
He's actually what saved me, because I already knew they were gonna help me grow. And so I would have went down horribly. I'm so sorry. I would have went down horribly. I had already put in my mind I didn't ever want to be abused again. So I just had this independence, and I was just gonna go down, because I knew they wasn't gonna let me have her. And I got pregnant with him, and that's the only thing that saved me. But I thought they were gonna take him because they would not tell me anything, and they would just drag me through there. I got lawyers, and I was almost signed him over to her just in case, because I was so afraid that they were gonna take him. And they didn't. And I had they sent even Nixa, because I live in Nixa. They sent a caseworker to the hospital because they thought, I guess they just assumed I had drugs in my past. And so they told me he was, they just really drugged me through there. I ended up getting to take him. That caseworker came to court, actually the time that they took Val decided just to give her away, basically. And she came and told them that she didn't, she didn't feel any type of way. I mean, you came to court for me, but I honestly just felt like I was an easy target, and my daughter was just an easy child just to take. I'm so sorry. So I don't really, I don't even know what the question was.
It's okay, you're good, you're good. I just want to point that out because I think it's really important to see that there is a lot of heartbreak in the system. There's a lot of trauma. I would say that the number one thing that is in common with every family we work with is trauma, and that there's a lot. But healing is possible even at all stages, and I'm so proud of you for what you're providing for your little boy, and I'm so proud of you for sharing your story because I know it's painful, but I think your perspective is so important, so thank you for being here.
My storytelling sucks. I'm sorry. I love you too.
One of our mamas who wanted to be here tonight and couldn't, she was actually on her way and remembered she had a kiddo's basketball practice, is one of our mamas who did reunify. And I'm not going to go into a lot of her story or that story, but we've also gotten to celebrate kiddos going home. And I think the important thing I want to talk about is all the parents I work with are so brave. But kids reunifying is not the happy ending that so many people think that it could be. Many of our families who reunify, they are, and I would put Alexis in that category because she's raising Sweet Baby King. Like, there is so much to navigate as a parent who has spent time separated, a parent who has had to walk through this trauma with their child, because even if giving that parent space to get on their feet was necessary, the separation is traumatic no matter what. Foster care is always traumatic. And we get calls and phone calls all the time about parents who, you know, they're dealing with the behaviors and the struggles that have come after that reunification. They're dealing with some of those barriers of, you know, of poverty barriers, of barriers that are generational, and still maybe not having like that support system. People who are like, I had to learn to cut my mom and dad out. I don't have someone to help me with my kid. Can you please help me? Years down the line, we sometimes get phone calls of just, do you know this resource? Because we're navigating this struggle with our kids. And so the journey doesn't stop once those cases are closed. And I know caseworkers who wish they could stay involved and see their families, but they have to focus on the new ones that are coming into care. And so after 3 months, they don't have that contact anymore. And for so many of these families, they lose that whole degree of contact and support. And so I, as someone who works alongside so many reunified parents as well, want to advocate that these families, all families in our system, they need our support. They need communities that they're safe enough to come into with children who have high behaviors, children who have diagnoses, children who are not going to just fit nicely in your church nursery. Like, they need people who are trauma-informed, people who are going to be really sensitive on holidays and anniversaries, and just safe places to know that they don't have to pretend that they're this perfect family, because none of us are perfect. And so I know that we had several that would have loved to be here and share parts of their story, but my advocacy is just that we need more churches, we need more organizations in our community that are willing to fight with families while they navigate continuing ongoing trauma, while their children grow up and while they continue to heal and grow.
I think one of the things I'll piggyback on while Holly's hugging Alexis goodbye. Alexis is probably, I'm going to say something to you really fast before you leave. I want you to hear from Holly and I that your story, and now I'm going to cry, and your fight and the way that we watched your case play out is really one of the biggest factors that helped us put together Roots, and the idea to have a family campus, and the belief that while you may not have gotten the resources you needed, your story has inspired solutions that I hope are going to help other families who've walked in your shoes and will walk in your shoes in this community. And so I know you want to be a part of that, and I'm excited to have your experience be part of that with us. But that's so much of why we believe that these kind of solutions are so desperately needed in this community, because I'm tired of stories where we just run out of time and waiting lists are too long and resources are too few, and the results of that are what we've had to watch in your story. And so I love you and thank you for sharing your experience. Yeah. Ashley, I'm gonna have you come up next.
So one of the perspectives that we've yet to hear from, and Ashley, I asked you specifically because you have a lot of different advocacy in your story, is that of a foster parent. And I will also go say that as a person who has fostered and who works with a lot of foster parents, there are also a lot of stigmas around foster parent. There's a lot of yuck and heartbreak and exhaustion and a lot of things that feel like they're promised and then they don't have that degree of support. And so foster parents are heroes. And so many of them have no idea what they're getting into when they do it. Ashley signed up to foster a while ago, and it took a long time for you to go through the process because it was during pandemic. But Ashley also has a huge heart to foster teenagers, which is a huge gap in our community because we have a lot of teenagers who have nowhere to go. And statistically, there is a very high number of teenagers who identify in the LGBTQ community. And those kids are some of the hardest to place, especially in communities where there are not homes who are affirming of them. And there are caseworkers who sometimes tell these kiddos to just lie about it so that they can stay in a safe house, but that's not safe. And so I want you to tell a little bit of your story as a foster parent, but also as a foster parent who's been willing and passionate about loving on some of these kids that other homes aren't always as open to.
Thank you, and thanks for having me here. My name is Ashley Quinn. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I myself am a queer and trans man. I think it was several years ago, I was reading like a story in Rolling Stones or something about somebody who was a college student who came out to their parents cut them off financially, you know, they were paying for school and then they weren't, and how they tried to keep from, like, they basically were homeless and going to college and trying to figure out how to do that. And like that, reading that story, I was like, that like was almost me. I mean, like I when I came out to my parents when I was in college as queer, I thought, like, how am I gonna do this if they cut me off financially? And they didn't end up doing that. But like, I realized that was, I don't know, in my mind, that was like a high probability of a consequence of me coming out to them. And so I was fortunate that didn't happen to me. And there are lots of times I can't even imagine what it would be like to have come out in high school. And fortunately for me, I just wasn't that self-aware. Or I think it would have been a lot harder going to the Catholic school and my family that I was in at the time. And so I was just oblivious. It was weird, but whatever. So just knowing whether that's the actual cause, which I don't know that oftentimes it is the cause. You know, one of the LGBT kids that I've got in my home now, you know, had a mom who had an abusive boyfriend and struggles with basically trying to self-medicate through her own trauma with drugs, and just made her not a very capable parent for him. But then, like, he's a trans guy who's spent the past year in a residential facility in the girls' dorm, constantly misgendered. And I'm just like, how is that okay? Like, how did that happen? Like, that's not okay. So yeah, so when I decided to start fostering, I definitely was, I mean, I put on there like age range 0 to 18, you know, like I'll take whatever. One of my kids was asking me one time, he was like, so what's the like youngest age that we could potentially take if we took in a second kid or whatever? And I was like, anything, we could have a baby. And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah, we could. I mean, I like babies, it's fine. And he's like, At the same time, I kind of thought too, you know, now that I have a teenager, like, it would probably be easier if there was a second kid if they were also a teenager, just for, I don't know, what kind of games we stock in the house or something like that. And I'm also like, some people who foster have their own kids or their own kids grow up and then they foster or something like that. Like these are my first tries at parenting. So I'm sorry to them for that. And you know, I'm a wing it kind of person. Like, and I'm just like, I took the classes you have to take to become a foster parent, but, and I had some ideas going in or whatever, but I'm also like, okay, this isn't working. We're gonna have to try something new next week. So that's a lot of it. But yeah, with the, and I mean, I've been, I guess, thankful. I posted something in one of the Facebook groups for foster parents. I posted something a couple weeks ago that was a statistic about trans kids, young adults, have something like a 40 some odd % suicidality rate, or attempts. And if they have a supportive adult in their life, in their home, it drops to 4%, which is more like normal teenage rates. And so, like, I shared that in that group, and I was just like, you know, what you can do as a foster parent for these kids is like literally life-saving. And if you and you don't know, like, you're not going to necessarily know when a kid gets placed with you, whether they are or not, and they're not going to know whether or not you're a safe person to come out to or not. And so I was just like, make sure that you're open and that you know, make sure that your kid knows that they can tell you. And I was pleasantly surprised, overwhelmingly, the people who commented, and some people I'm sure just stayed quiet, said supportive things. And there was like one person who said like a not supportive thing, but they thought they were saying it in a supportive way. And I was like, yeah, no, that's harmful and you need education. So who's your caseworker? So not to lay it all on the caseworkers. So, cause yeah, the caseworker that I've been working with is great, but like, as you were saying, like my licensing worker, you know, there was the person who like went through, they call it the home study, but they just like, they ask you there's like a 19-page biography of me that's like on a state file somewhere. It's probably, anyone can probably read it, I guess, if they wanted to, not that they would. So like there's that person who did that, and then I got a licensing worker, and that person worked with me for a couple months, and then they left Children's Division, and I got somebody new, and I've met with them twice now, and I don't know if they'll be the next person I meet or if it'll be somebody new next time. And my kids have had multiple caseworkers, and then like what you were describing about the investigations and things and the timelines on that, or on Martin Luther King Day of this year, on January 17th, I got a phone call that was like, would you be willing to take in somebody on respite for like 3 to 5 days? And I was like, what questions am I supposed to ask here? Like, this is my first time being asked to do this. Like, what do I need to know? And they were like, well, the kid is in Republic School District. I live in Springfield. And they were like, so we're trying to find someone close enough so that they can continue going to school in that district. And I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, for a week, I can drive them to school in Republic. I can handle that. They still live with me. And
you still drive them to school in Republic.
I still drive them to school in Republic every day. And so there was a point where, you know, I was like, so like, what's the timeline on things exactly, or whatever? And they were like, well, there's this investigation happening in the home that they were previously in, and they're supposed to resolve in 30 to 45 days. So any day now, we should have a resolution on that. And I was like, oh, okay. And we're just like, every time we'd have a meeting, I'm like, so do we have a resolution on anything? And they're like, nope, not yet. And I was like, okay. And it sucks for the kid, because like she's like, I want to go back to the home I was in before, and the home she was in before wasn't the home that she grew up in. It was another foster home that's in Republic. Her family's back in Lebanon, so I mean, like, you know, like, so she's just kind of like all over the place or whatever, and that sucks for her. And then I think specifically for her, I mean, both of my kids basically had lived in households where there was an abusive stepdad kind of situation, and she does not respond well to me. Like, I'm just another jerk of a guy basically to her, and I'm a single foster parent, so there's no like mom there or something to like mediate me or something, or mitigate, I don't know, to like, so she's just stuck with me. So that sucks for her, I'm sure. So, and at the same time, you know, talking about timelines or whatever, like, I feel this pressure in that, like, she's 17, the other kid is 16. I'm like, I just met you, and I feel like I have to prepare you to be an adult in 9 months. Okay. And so, like, I feel like I'm like way too hard on them. And at the same time, I'm just like, but if you don't learn these things quickly, like, it's gonna screw things up for you later on. And so I'm trying to help you, and I realize it doesn't seem like that to you. So that's that side of things. I don't know. I think I'm rambling. I'm gonna stop.
You're not, but I want to ask you a question. Because you and I have had some conversations about your volunteerism and your passion for our unsheltered community too, and now having kids that will approach an aging out date in your home.
Yeah.
And we've had this conversation before of like, do we need to like teach them survival skills?
Oh, yeah.
Because that's a real horrible possibility. And like, I just want to name that and acknowledge that
Yeah.
because I don't
I'm like,
think-
let's go camping so that you can learn how to live outside if you have to in a year.
Right.
Like,
Because in Springfield, our resources are so stretched thin that even though there are some good programs, for a wide variety of reasons, right? Whether we don't have enough funding, whether trauma forces kids down a different path for a while. I mean, heck, I went down a different path just as an 18-year-old who didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. And
Yeah.
so, you know, that timeline, that season, talk a little bit about just that fear for you and that uncertainty, because you do live kind of in this duality of some different existences in our community.
yeah, so one of my jobs is as the justice coordinator with National Avenue Christian Church, and we partner to run a crisis cold weather shelter in the wintertime. And then we also do a weekly meal for kind of adult unsheltered folks that we do out of the basement of Grace United Methodist Church, or veterans coming home, depending on what time of year it is. We also help provide a meal at the Glow Center and at Rare Breed on a monthly basis. But so, I mean, quite literally, I was at the meal service last Monday, and this guy like blew up at somebody, just yelling and cussing from across the room or whatever, and he walked over asking me to see if I could find a pair of pants for him because it was a cold day and it was raining and he was just wearing a pair of shorts. And I was like, let me go look. And then I had to leave looking because I heard screaming and yelling. And so I come back out of the closet where the pants are or whatever, and this guy's yelling. And so we're trying to get him to calm down a little bit, but it's not working. And so I'm just like, okay, you have to leave now. And like after he was out the door and gone, I'm like, and he doesn't have pants now, all because he got like really upset with somebody. And I was like, and I was just like, I could see one of my kids acting just like that. And he felt like he was the person being wronged, you know, and that he was trying to stand up for himself by shouting. And I was like, I get that you feel that way, and also this just isn't appropriate. Like it disrupts everybody else in the room, and like so you just can't respond like that. And so like that's where like, and I can like see one of my kids doing that, you know, and just being like, how do I teach you to like not do that so that you can get like. Yes, like everything is effed up and wrong in the world, and it's not fair and it's unjust, and you have every right to scream about it. And if you scream about it, you're not going to get what you need. So
Walk away with no pants.
yeah, and so like that piece of things, and I'm trying to get one of them to like their cell phone is on the fritz and they don't actually have service for it, and so I'm like, check out the like free government phone, like.
Right.
Google it and figure out how to apply for it. And the push there is like, you're gonna have to do a lot of this kind of stuff in your life. You're gonna have to fill out stupid government bureaucratic forms in order to get the resources that you need. So like, do a little test run on a cell phone, you know? And she's not interested in doing that or whatever, and it's not really working. And in the meantime, when she runs away, I can't get a hold of her because her phone doesn't work. So like, I'm like, I think I have to rethink that one for the time being, or at least like sit with her and do it or something like that to get to that first step.
Yeah.
And I think too, like, it's something you mentioned earlier, just about the other people, like she and I got, and you know, like, it was just like, somebody mentioned that the car rides with the kids were like this treasured time. It has been miserable driving this kid to school for the last week. Like, she's pissed at me. I'm, you know, like, I'm not happy with her. You know, like, I'm waiting for an apology that's not coming or something like that. And so one day, you know, like I dropped her off and she'd made some snide comment about like, no wonder I wasn't married or something. And I was just like, ouch.
They always know where to get you.
They do.
Right?
And so I called my little brother and I was like, hey, what are you doing this afternoon at 3? Do you want to drive to Republic and pick up my kid? And he did, and then he was like, if you want me to drop her off at school in the morning, I could do that too. And I was like, would you please? Thank you. And then, this weekend, one of my friends was like, you guys want to come over and like do s'mores or whatever? And I was like, yes. And I just like sat there exhausted, like rocking in a patio chair, like staring at the flames while they like
Yeah.
were fine, and entertained or whatever. And I was just like, thank you. Like right after I got the second kid in my home, this is the beauty of a church community too. Like people just started like, hey, I had this extra casserole. Can I drop it off? And I was like, yeah, sure. I don't know what it is, but we'll eat it. Yes, thank you. I don't have to think about food.
With teenagers, food is always an appropriate
yes,
gift.
It is.
Yes.
So yeah, just people just like, and there were sometimes people would be like, would you let me know what it is or help or whatever? And I was just like, I don't know. Can you just do something? I don't know what it is. Like, it'll probably be fine, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I mean, and I think that's that's true. I think whether it's a single foster parent or a single parent that's trying to hold on to their kids or make it, in the world, or multi-parent households who are still just like trying to get through. Like if I had a neighbor in Boulder who, when we moved in, there was this cheap-looking bamboo thing, like zip-tied to the chain link fence in between the two yards. And I walked out there, and my neighbor was in the yard, and I was like, is this yours? Like, what's up with this? Because it was only like part of the fence line. Really just basically the part of the fence line where you could see the neighbor's yard, sort of. And I was like, so what's up with this? Did you want this for privacy or something? And she was like, no. She was like, I was pregnant. She's like, I decided to do like IVF at like 50 because I wanted a kid and I didn't have one yet. And so she's like, so I was pregnant and 50 and working these crazy hours. And my lawn got kind of tall, and my neighbor commented on it, and the person who lived in my house before me, and then like the next week she put up this bamboo thing, and I was like, instead of offering to help you mow your lawn, she just decided to like block it off so she couldn't see you. I was like, that's an interesting choice. And I like pulled my pocket knife out of my pocket, and just as I'm like undoing zip ties, talking to her, and I was like, okay, well, this thing is going away now. And we had a beautiful relationship with her and her kids. So I think just, look around and help out your neighbors.
Yeah, just see people.
Yeah, see
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, I think, again, that goes back to that community call to action, right? We can all do something. And even if you don't know what to do, like, just find something, right? Like a gift card, bring coffee, mow a lawn, make a casserole, whatever. It goes a long, long way. You're exactly right.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of, and I think this comes sometimes from the desperation of caseworkers trying to find placements, and it comes from a shortage of foster homes and places to send kids. We are seeing kids that are so often separated from siblings. We have kiddos that are moved hours away from parents just to find a place that they can determine is safe enough for them. That I know a lot of foster parents get a phone call like you got that's like, hey, can you take this kiddo just for a few days, or you just have to do this, or just this, and there'll be all these other support, and then it ends up being a lot longer than a few days. It ends up being not just being a safe place for them to sleep at night, but they have to drive that kiddo to their school in a different city. They have to drive them to all their doctor's appointments, their counseling appointment. They then have to attend FST meetings and be driving to those things. And if it's an old enough kiddo who wants to participate, they have to drive them there. If they have parent-child visits, that caseworker may be like, can you drive them? Like, there's no one else. Can you drive them? And so I know a lot of our foster parents, like, if you can get them to say what they need, they're going to be like, well, really, I need a vacation. Like, but I don't have anyone who can take these kiddos. Mm-hmm. And respite beds are really, so you can actually just be a respite foster home. And so you just take kids for short-term weekends, like for weeks, over holidays or over weekends, so that foster parents can just go on vacation or get a day off or get a break. There's a massive shortage in those, so that's a huge need. But there is a rule in Missouri, and I forget what it's called now, but in essence, the state trusts the foster parent to make choices on who gets to hang out with that child. And so they can, like, your brother can pick up your kid.
Yeah.
And so sometimes being able to say, like, hey, can I help transport your kid to something this week for you? And I'll, we'll put on tunes and I'll talk to them and it'll be great. Or if they don't want to talk to me, fine. Like, but I will do the driving for you. To, 2 ways to one thing. I'll take your kid for an evening or for a night. Like, just some of those things can be incredibly helpful. Dinners obviously are a great ask, like just not having to think about food, not having to think about some of those things. I know so many foster parents that fall in the same boat as everyone else who's been mentioned. They're tired. And there's a lot of burnout that happens. And so sometimes they're making decisions that are coming from that place of I'm just exhausted. And so, and a lot of up and down, there's a lot of moments of like, this is going really good. And you get, I hate that saying that people say, like, I'm afraid I'd get too attached. Like, you get attached in foster care and then you get frustrated with your kid and you're frustrated with the case. You're excited that something happened. You're not excited. Like, there is so much up and down and there's no fault in that. It's just messy.
Yeah. And I mean, when I got involved at first and they said, the primary goal or the default goal or whatever is reunification, and I was like, great. Like, and that there was that part of, I mean, when I was thinking about LGBTQ kids, which is the way I had it in my head is not exactly the way it is on, in real life or whatever, which is fine. But was that like, when I came out to my parents, like, they told me it was wrong and they didn't agree with me. They and then I just decided, okay, I'm just not going to talk to you about this part of my life for a while. And I had the freedom to do that because I lived 2 states away and was going to college. But for a kid who's younger, like, I could see like a fight that makes them leave, or you can't do that under my roof, or something like that happening, and then give it some time and some space, and parties want to come back together, but maybe you don't know where your kid ran off to, or you can't find them, or something like that. So like, if me providing a foster home would give parents and kids that space to come back together at some point, then great. Yeah. So I think I liked that idea, and also at the same time, and it's also kind of that weird. It's like a perfectly normal developmental stage for kids to be like, I don't need my parents. I'm 17. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to be an adult. I got this. I did that when I was that age, right? And so like the mix between that and it's like, like constantly saying, I'm not their dad. I don't, I'm like, well, no, I'm not. And I wouldn't expect you to think that I am. And so I think that there's pieces of that come into it. But I think too, one of the things I was going to mention is that I think I knew going in that the thing that was probably going to be the hardest would be the bureaucracy of it, would be like filling out the travel log reimbursement form, sort of like remembering to do that, getting it in on time or whatever, like the meetings, the things. Like my kid, one of my kids doesn't have their birth certificate, so like they can't go try to get a first job, they can't go get their permit, and they've been in care for like 2 years, so theoretically that should have been asked, like sent off for or whatever, and like put in the file years ago, and it wasn't for whatever reason. And when I went asking for it, because we were going to go get the kids permit, they've said they've sent off. It's not a Missouri one; it's in another state, and it's just like we're going on like 8 months of waiting for a birth certificate to show up from Nevada, and it's just like, seriously, like the kid just wants to go get their driver's permit. Like, can we just like try to have a little bit of normal? And it's just like, no, you can't have normal things. So that part of things is frustrating. I didn't get paid properly for months, and just having to deal with that. And it was just like, the other stuff would not be as hard and as frustrating if I also wasn't worrying about like the money to pay for the food and stuff that's supposed to be there that's not.
And that's not money that you make in profit. That is literally subsidy to reimburse you for the cost of raising a kid and driving that kid to Republic
Yeah.
every day, 2 times a day, and providing shoes and clothing and all the necessities and their sports activities and just feeding them. Like there's a lot of stigmas around that foster parents do it for the money. They do not do it for the money. You cannot pay someone enough to, like, they're not making enough. All of that money is going back into just surviving with that kiddo. And so when those are
and then some,
delayed, which is really common,
Yeah.
that is incredibly stressful on anyone, but those needs are still there. And so so many of our foster parents are putting not only time and love and their house and their family and everything into this child or these children. They also are spending a lot of money on these kids, and that's a really important thing too, because all foster parents aren't rich. All adoptive parents aren't rich. And I think that's another side, just to mention, that when a case is closed, if a child is adopted, there's a lot of resources that are lost in that. And so we have a lot of adoptive parents who are struggling because they can't always make ends meet, or they can't provide some of these things, and there's not something out there. And they have kids that are high trauma kids that need therapies and need support. And sometimes they don't have anywhere, they also don't have anywhere for kiddos to go for a weekend so they can get a vacation and they can catch their breath. And so those needs don't stop. And those are not needs the system can meet, those are needs the community has to meet.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, to that point, like the maintenance money that does come, when it first comes, it comes after like a full month, basically, after a kid has been in your care, maybe 45 days after a kid has been in your care. And you know, it's not like they get dropped off at your door and like, here's a check to help pay for all of the stuff you're going to need in the first week that you have them here, or something like that. So if you're looking for other ways to support, you know, there are places like Ambassadors for Children and Foster Adopt Connect and other kinds of things that provide some of those. You know, you can take your kid in and get them some clothes and stuff that's just covered or whatever. But yeah, just even if just, you know, helping to cover some of those costs of things in those, I mean, the system needs to be reformed, but in the meantime, helping people in those first, you know, weeks or whatever.
Things like asking, what's that kid's favorite, whatever it is, I'll go buy them a bedspread that matches what they like. Or, you know, did you get shoes at Ambassadors or Sammy's? Well, no, they didn't have the kind of shoes they wanted. We got them something, they're compromising, but what do they want? I want to show them that they're worth what they want. So I'll go buy those brand new Nike shoes for you so you don't have to do that. Like, those things mean the world to that kid, but also to that foster parent, because there's a lot of foster parents that want to do those things, but they just can't.
Yeah.
I also just want to acknowledge too that piece of if it is a wealthier home that is fostering, or even just wealthier than where they came from or something like that, sometimes the birth parents might look at that and go, well, my kid's better off, like they have all their needs provided for or something like that there. Or even just for the kid, like they might be like, I like this place, you know, I got a Nintendo here or something like that. I didn't have a Nintendo at home. And those, I mean, the kids aren't that superficial, obviously, but that piece of things can be an adjustment as well, both coming into it and then if you are reunified, like what does that look like then when food is scarce or something like that. So.
Yeah, that's a conversation that we have often around here, this idea that poverty is not a crime, and that poverty is not something that kids need to be saved from, but something that our community needs to rally around to support the family as a whole. And that's an issue of like, how do we come around and elevate more resources and activate more support systems to help that family, not just view that as we need to get these kids out of an impoverished situation. I think that's really an important point to make. So, and as we close, I have to tell you something as a parent of teenagers myself. You're making a much bigger difference than you think you are a lot of days. And I have, like, my oldest is 20, and he'll call a lot now every day when he drives home. And every once in a while, he'll make these little statements where he's like, well, one time you told me, or, you know, this. And I'm like, okay, so all those years where you used to tell me how much you didn't like me or how terrible I was, like something was still getting through. Yeah. So even in those moments, and even in this season where you feel like that this may not be the best place or that they're not happy, you are making a difference and they're going to look back for years and years and years and remember this time that they were there with you, and the seeds that you sowed into them, the support that you gave them, the love and the support that you were. So don't undercut yourself in that area, because you're making a huge difference. I know that, and they're going to see that in time.
Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate you.
Thank you.
So we're wrapping up. I think we knew this was going to be a hard night on the heart. But I think what's really hard is to realize, like, these stories, while all very important, are such a teeny tiny tip of the iceberg. There are thousands and thousands of these stories in our community, of families in every perspective and every angle, and every one of them are important. And so talk for just a few minutes, your last kind of closing thoughts and challenge in Foster Care Awareness Month, just some ways you might challenge people to connect, to learn more.
Hello. Oh, there we go. On any given day in Greene County, we're seeing about 700 to 800 kids in the foster care system at that moment. 800 has kind of been on the high end, but that's been since COVID. And we've seen a lot of that because of the impact of the economy and just poverty and stress. We have kiddos that are in care because they lost their parents to illness or something that has caused their parents to pass away, and they haven't had anyone. Not every child is in the foster care system because of those degrees of abuse and neglect, and not everything that is labeled neglect or abuse falls under some of those things that we assume about people. And there definitely are those horrible stories. But after having done this for several years, there are so many beautiful people that are just fighting. They are fighting to survive. They are fighting to survive, to go home to their kiddos, to bring their kiddos home. Kids that are fighting to survive while they're getting, they're struggling with all the dynamics that come with foster care and aging out and adoption. Like, adoption is traumatic no matter how beautiful it's packaged. We see so many of those things as cycles. We've been doing some surveys and some research that I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about, but so many of our families that do not have their kids with them or have had periods where their children are not with them were kids themselves that were in foster care or separated from their parents for some reason. So many of our families, almost all of our families, I would say, in our foster care system are living at or below the poverty line. And so many of them grew up in poverty or had something happened that they lost a parent, their parents stopped talking to them, and they've struggled to survive. Like, there is something there. Something happened. It can be a lot, and it can be overwhelming, and there's a lot of people, and I respect people who say, I don't have the capacity to foster, I don't have the time or the energy. I believe that we have to advocate for ourselves in those spaces, because people who are not in a healthy space or have that to give are only going to do damage. But there are so many ways to be involved with families in the system. And just to name a few, like, our families who have reunified, they need a support system. They need people to check on them, people to hang out with their kiddos, people to offer to drive their kids to basketball practice and therapy appointments, because those things are still there every single day. One of my favorite things in the world to do, and this is so simple, is asking, how to help with gifts that you give to that parent to give to that kid. And so if a parent is working a minimum wage job and 50 hours a week, there may not be enough to buy a Christmas present, but those kids sure dang deserve a good Christmas present. And that parent deserves to give it to them, not me, not you, not someone who has the money to do it. Like, just asking, because I see how hard you're working, can I help you get this? Because I respect and I am so proud of you. And I've had so many of our parents that have just been like, thank you for seeing that. And it's from them, it's not from us. Doing things like for our current foster parents, offering to help out with kiddos if you have the capacity to do that, dropping off a meal, sending them a gift cards. Like, if you don't have time, gift cards are amazing, like pizza gift cards, things like that, just give them a night off. Words of encouragement, just being able to tell them, like, you're doing a good job, or to kiddos, you matter, I see you, you're important. Those little things to kids go a very, very, very long way.
Yeah.
If you know a kid who has aged out of the system, check to make sure they have plans for Christmas or Easter, and just, if they don't, invite them over and just make them feel like they belong. We have a lot of kids that spend a lot of holidays alone, and I say kids because it doesn't matter if they're 18, 19, 20 years old. Like, we all want to go home for Christmas. We all want to have someone cook us a meal or just enjoy sitting in our own presence. And so to just extend those invitations can mean the world. If you're a part of our churches need to freaking do better. We need to see a movement in our faith community that is affirming and accepting of all walks of life. And that includes parents who have lost their kids permanently, parents who are working towards reunifying with their children, adoptive parents who are struggling with kids that they have to pull out of the nursery every week because their behaviors are not appropriate for Sunday school, foster parents who are dealing with the exact same thing and who are struggling because sometimes faith communities are really triggering for our kiddos and for our parents. And so having conversations, being sensitive, just doing our part as we've worked in Family Connection. I'm not gonna say that I've done it all right, because I haven't, and I've not always said the right thing. But being a presence that just simply speaks love and value into people, being someone who just listens. Like, I'm not always gonna know how to tell somebody the right thing or the advice or what resource to point them to, but just to sit and hold someone after their kid is driven away by a foster parent and just tell them that they're seen and their feelings are valid and they're doing a good job, and if they need something, I'm just happy to listen to them process and cry and scream. It's like Ashley said, you deserve to scream, and sometimes you need a safe place to scream. Like, we all deserve that. And so I think that there are hundreds of ways that we could all get involved, that we could all use our voices and advocate. Social media platforms are powerful. They can be dangerous, but they can be powerful. And so speaking up and speaking out and just being willing to affirm the people in our community who just need more support.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna help you with that a little bit throughout the rest of the month. So over the next few weeks, Holly's gonna be sharing on our Facebook page 6 different kind of foster care statistics and different things like that. So they'll be shared over the course of the next couple of weeks. Those are great opportunities for you to watch for those posts and then to share them to help raise some of those awareness. So Holly will do a lot of that work for you by sharing some of the statistics and the research and the data. You can simply help share that and encourage people to get involved in some of these ways that she's talking about. As you mentioned, we are doing one of our TCG research studies. So we do these once a quarter. This quarter's study has revolved around parents and families that have dealt with separations. And so we're looking at Springfield-based numbers of people who have had separation from their kids and kind of looking at trends and patterns, and really intrigued by some of the things that we're seeing. Some of it's not surprising, some of it is surprising. But we're gonna be releasing the results of that full study at the very end of this month. So be watching for that as well on social media. That's another great piece that you can share for some local advocacy and kind of some of those things that we see here. So I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope that this was informative and just kind of challenged you to think about different perspectives. I just want to take a minute and thank you for your leadership here at TCG every day and your leadership in our community, the fearless and courageous and tireless way that you advocate for families in the foster care system, for kids that have aged out of care. I am constantly blown away by your heart for this system and to bring change to it, to shine a light on the injustices of it, and most importantly, to just love people in the midst of it all. You have such a gift for that. So I'm blessed and honored to get to do leadership with you here at TCG every day. So thank you for what you do. All right. Thank you guys again for joining us. We're going to go ahead and turn off our live stream. If you guys do have questions about Family Connection or how to get involved, you can always reach out to us just through our Facebook page. You can send us a message. You can send us a message through our website, or you can email Holly directly at holly@theconnectinggrounds.com. So thanks again. We appreciate you all, and keep watching for some of those other resources and moments throughout the month.